Writing an introduction is the hardest part for me, for some reason. So, this is all you get. Today we will talk about Summer Camp Island. Many of you might have heard of this show, thanks to a certain bad news that affected a lot of animated shows. We will talk about that later. Going into this show, I had no great expectations. I was fairly certain that I would like it, based on its animation style. What I did not expect was to love it. Summer Camp Island exceeded all my expectations. So what is it about? It's very simple. A bunch of kids go on a summer camp on a magical island, they have a great time, and in the later half of the show, they try to save magic. Each episode introduces a new element of the magical world, adding depth to the story and keeping the audience eagerly anticipating what comes next. There is some plot, but it only comes about from the season 3 on, while the first two seasons are mostly episodic with some plot elements in them. While the show starts with a mostly episodic format, the overarching plot begins to take shape in the third season. The initial two seasons primarily focus on episodic adventures, allowing viewers to become acquainted with the characters, the island, and the world of magic. The first two seasons hold a special place in my heart, as I found them to be the best. I loved the nice episodic episodes that seemingly wove a small continuity between them. These seasons were just pure fun. The third season brought about some significant changes, and in all honesty, it wasn't as good as before. Still my personal opinion, the abrupt shift in the show style left me feeling a bit disconnected, and it seemed like the writers were navigating unfamiliar territory, which is a bit weird for me since I'm a big fan of linear storytelling. Now, don't get me wrong, there were plenty of good things in this season too, mostly in the first part with Susie and the witches. I loved all the lore we got with this part, and the background on the island was really interesting. I did not really care about the aliens and their portion of the season, mostly because it felt like it was a filler, and the Yeti arc was fine. I liked the focus on a different character, in this case Lucy, since the story usually centers around Oscar or Hedgehog. Fourth season is pretty good, since it's really similar to season 1 and 2, with a bit more plot elements, since we are further on in the story. Unlike the third season, I love the fifth season. I think it's mainly because the writers learned how to use these short arcs more effectively, in order to progress the plot and enrich the world even more. It does a great job of enriching the world and answering a lot of questions, like what type of magical creatures are our campers? Well, all except Max. Yeah. All the campers are some type of magical creature, and that's why they were invited to the island. It feels like this season is used to patch up any plot holes before the last season, and I think honestly that's fine. And the last, sixth season is really good. All the plot elements come together and the story finishes with a happy ending. Honestly, I'm just glad that we got a proper ending with all the mess HBO Max has done with the show. Now, while the plot became a rather important part of the show as it went on, characters and their interactions always remained the most important aspect of it. This must be the reason why I like the first two seasons the best. Honestly, they are the reason why this show is so popular. The characters, especially Oscar, Susie, and Hedgehog, the three main characters, they are not all treated the same. Honestly, Oscar and Susie get way more development and stuff to do. Now, don't get me wrong, Hedgehog is very important. She does a lot of stuff, but somehow it feels like she gets the short end of the stick all the time. This might be just my personal feeling, but it really feels like she does not change a lot throughout the show. She trains to be a witch, which we see in a couple of episodes. That was cool. Then she becomes a witch, and that's about it. Also, she becomes a werewolf, for some reason. The show does nothing with it. There are 2 or 3 episodes that deal with her being a werewolf, and then the show forgets all about it. I mean, it's not like she stops being a werewolf, we just don't see her doing anything as one. On the other hand, Oscar has been given nothing ability-wise. Like seriously, they made him into a worm. Sure, a glowworm that has no magical abilities except giving others the power to have theirs. He is basically a building block of a magical world. Really important, and without him nothing would work, but still powerless on his own. Yet somehow he does so many things. I'm not mad that he is basically powerless. I just hope for more for him. Honestly, he becomes sort of an emotional support animal to the crew, and I think that it's not right to have a kid take on so much emotional burden at such a young age. I read online that he is seen as a victim of bullying in the show from Susie, and that Hedgehog is there to help him, and honestly, I kind of don't see it or agree with it. I mean, yes, there were times where Hedgehog helped him, a lot of times, but Oscar is still able to stand up for himself, and that is really probably the biggest reason I like him. And I don't think he ever let himself be bullied, because he always fought back and established a kind of frenemy situation with Susie. Since he always fought back and never took anything for granted, he sometimes gave her the first hit, which is not something people who are bullied do. And that's one of the reasons I like him. But my favorite is Susie. She's the best. She's funny, smart, capable, and the more we learn about her, the better she gets. Honestly, her development is the greatest, and her drive to do what has to be done is amazing. Honestly, her relationship with her sister is one of the best parts of this show. All the characters are pretty good, and they all get their time to shine, except one, who gets treated the worst by the show, Max. When the series started, Max was basically the third member of the main party. He was everywhere. It was all good until Hedgehog fell in love with him. That's when things went down for him. Where you see, Max said no. That was fine. That was good. It was cool to see that not all crushes end up in a relationship, and that's something that sometimes you will get rejected. The real problem was what to do after the whole love story. The writers didn't know what to do with him, so they stopped using him. Like full stop. He went from one of the main characters, someone who showed up every episode, to being the only member who didn't get a special episode to show his powers and how he awakened them. I have rarely seen such a fall from grace. It was sad, especially since we see him during every regular opening intro as one of the three main characters sitting in front of the campfire. Still, that's not even the biggest mess up in this show. And this one is not even the fault of the creators. It's the news that the show will be pulled from the services for a tax write-off as a part of a merger. Honestly, this might be one of the most heartbreaking things that can happen to a show, when someone just pulls it from existence. And the only way you can watch it is to pirate it, which is just not right in any way. I love pirating as anyone. Honestly, I grew up on it. But for that to be the only way for you to watch a show is unacceptable. The good news is that when I went looking for more info, it seems that you can still watch the show on Max or a couple of other streaming services. I just hope that the show doesn't suddenly disappear when we are not looking. All in all, I would definitely recommend that you watch this show, especially now, so that HBO sees that people still love it and to keep streaming it. That's about it. See you next time. Bye.